It's great to see so many people interested in
it is, Joel, isn't it?
And actually just in time, because I'm off to India tomorrow to continue working on the topic.
Amazing. I know my team had an amazing time when they went out. So
yeah, and we're just where your team went, I'm going as well. We're gonna open our biggest project yet, and basically all thanks to brands like Noughty who keep supporting. So looking forward to report from there.
Great.
So everybody make sure to follow CleanHub on Instagram, because we'll be posting live a lot. And we can take you on the journey there as well.
Okay, I think let's get started and then everybody can follow when they join. So, hi everybody and welcome to Sustainability Beauty in Action. I'm Victoria, Product Director at Noughty, and I'm delighted to be hosting the conversation today in celebration of British Beauty Week. Joining me is Joel, founder of CleanHub, and we're excited to dive into the important topic of sustainability and reducing plastic waste in the beauty industry. Before we get started, just a couple of house rules. We'll be covering a few key topics and then opening up the floor for questions at the end. So feel free to submit your questions throughout and we'll get to them later. This session is being recorded and will be shared afterwards for everyone who couldn't make it live. Now, let's get started. To kick things off, I'd like to start talking about the stories behind Noughty and CleanHub, as well as our shared values for reducing plastic waste. When we first launched Noughty back in 2016, sustainability was at the heart of what we were doing, but that needed to be in conjunction with high-performance products that are kinder to both people and planet. But Joel, I'd love you to jump in here and share how CleanHub came to be, how you got started, and what inspired you to tackle plastic waste.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I always say that the entire story basically starts with how I was brought up. I grew up at Lake Constance, which is the biggest lake in Germany, and that meant I spent my entire childhood in and around water. I loved water sports. I was sailing, and in summer swimming, and in the winter we had the Swiss and the Austrian Alps, and spent a lot of time outdoors. And southern Germany in general is a very clean spot, a very beautiful nature. But as I got older, I wanted to leave home, and I started surfing. And surfing basically took me to some of the most magnificent places on earth, in Indonesia, in Senegal, in South Pacific, beautiful places. But one thing was always eminent, and there was plastic pollution, right? It's like you stepped on the beach, it was littered. You got into the water, you came out and had your pockets of the board shorts full of plastic. And at some point I said, okay, I feel like this is the topic that I want to spend my career on working. And there was then really the start of the research for CleanHub. We didn't start with a solution then, but we said, okay, first we need to understand the problem before we can actually start building a solution.
Amazing. I mean, I remember back in 2020, it was when we first started talking, and at the time I was on Noughty's behalf, obviously looking for partners to help us with our commitment to reducing plastic waste. One of the key things that drew me to CleanHub and what I really loved about it was the fact that it wasn't just about the plastic that you can recycle that you were collecting, but it was more importantly the plastic that can't be recycled that you were really wanting to clean up. And that was the key driver for me very much wanting to work with yourselves. Why do you think the partnership between us has worked so well from your perspective?
I think you just mentioned a very important point, because there was already a deep understanding from your side of what sits at the core of the problem, right? Because if you look at the numbers, 80% of plastics in the ocean is flexible packaging, is multi-layer packaging, where you have aluminum plastic compounds, which you usually find in chips bags, for example, or these little giveaways, especially I think in the beauty industry. Sometimes when you open, I don't know, the Vogue, and there's like this single serve unit. And this is how a lot of people in the global south also buy their beauty products, right? They don't buy it in the big bottles because they just can't afford that. So they live on a day-to-day basis, often like not like us, paycheck to paycheck, but they get the money one day, they spend it, they get the money one day, they spend it. So they buy a lot of these small non-recyclable food wrappers, and this is what they're throwing away. And what gets littered. And only 20% of plastic in the ocean, according to the latest studies, is the plastic bottle. It's like the water bottle, is the shampoo bottle. And we said, okay, if you really want to focus on fixing plastic pollution in the ocean, we also need to focus on the material that nobody else is focusing on, right? Because there's so many initiatives out there that are collecting all the recyclable plastic and tell a nice story of how this is ocean plastic and putting that back into the cycle. But in the end, what's happening is often that you're taking a material that is already collected, you supercharge it with a story, and you sell it for 3 times the market price. So everybody makes a great margin, but you didn't really have a big dent on plastic pollution. And yeah, I was impressed when we had the conversation of how much of an understanding there was already on Noughty's side. And I think this is also obvious in how you design the products, right? It's all very cautious, I would say, and conscientious of the environment. So yeah, I think that's point number one. And
one of the other things that really was really part of the decision as well, I think, was the fact that it was a cooperative, a women's cooperative, you know, out in India that you were working with, because there's obviously the plastic element, which absolutely we wanted to get involved with, but there's the social element as well around it all, that you've done such an amazing work within the community there.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of plastic initiatives or initiatives around pollution is that you can touch some of the biggest issues we have in the world, right? Social injustice, pollution, climate change. These are all topics, like ocean safety. These are all topics that can be covered. And in that specific project that we're doing, the waste collection is done by these so-called women's self-help groups, which are small units, and they can lend out money to each other. It's a very supportive system. And they are not going into a landfill to pick up trash from a big mountain of waste where it's hazardous to work, but they do it the way how we do it, basically. They go from door to door and they pick up the waste, and there's conversations on the doorstep, and it's a safe and it's a dignified job, right? It's like we don't have to send someone on a landfill to get God knows which diseases from picking through other people's trash. And this is unfortunately also what you see a lot in waste management in the global south, is this big social injustice. And yeah, I think one thing that I want to highlight also when talking about why this partnership works is because you mean it. And there is obvious in so many regards, right? You were saying we're talking since 2020, and Noughty is one of the longest standing partners we have. And there's no doubt in any year to continue the partnership and to continue working together and to finding new projects also that we can do, be it in education, be it with the scrunchie. So it's deeply rooted in the DNA, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joel, can you take us into a bit of a deeper dive into the global plastic waste crisis, talking to us about the current state of the ocean plastic and how it's affecting our ecosystems, just so that everybody can understand where we are at the moment with that?
Yeah. I think it's always bad to start on bad news, but the plastic production is ever increasing. It's actually almost like an exponential growth curve. So we're producing ever more plastic. People are getting richer. Prosperity is on the rise. So people consume more. At the same time, the waste management setup, like the waste management infrastructure, is not growing as fast as consumption. So total plastic inputs into the ocean is actually rising. And what does that mean for us as humanity is we're dumping a lot of plastic into the ocean, and it doesn't matter if that is in India or Indonesia or in the UK, in the North Sea or in the Pacific or wherever, because it's one water system, right? One water cycle. And the plastics in the ocean break down into microplastic particles. And the problem is these microplastic particles attract toxins from the water. And these tiny little toxic pieces of plastic are then swallowed by fish. And whoever is not living a vegetarian or a vegan life will ingest these toxins as well whenever consuming seafood. So we're finding microplastics in placentas, in the blood. We're finding microplastics in newborn. So it's not just in the ocean, but the ocean is transporting it back into our bodies. So it's something that is deeply affecting us as humans. So it's not just about protecting the environment, but it's also about protecting us and ourselves in preventing plastic from going into the ocean. That's the one effect. And then the second effect that's currently being, where there's more and more research on, is that it's actually harming the carbon pump in the ocean, because it's very intricate and complex ecosystem that is basically taking in carbon and through different microorganisms is pumping it down into the ocean. But because microplastics is then often mistaken for certain types of plankton, for example, it inhibits this pump. So the ocean seems to be absorbing less and less carbon because of the pollution that we have in the ocean. And then thirdly and lastly, when talking about ecosystems, the areas in the ocean that are most affected by plastic pollution are those that are close to the shore. And these are the most productive parts of the ecosystem. This is where we have all the fish or the reef. This is where so much of the oxygen is then also produced. And these are the ecosystems that are affected the hardest. And that's why it's so important to keep plastic out of the ocean.
I mean, I think with the wet weather we've had over the last summer, things like that, I think whereas before, 5 years ago, global warming, people talked about it, but it wasn't really, it was still, oh yeah, I think people are really starting to realize the effect that we are having on our planet and what we're doing to it and what we need to do in order to be able to start preventing that. Can you talk to us a bit about the process of CleanHub and what the process is?
Yes. So from, I would say, like the partner's perspective, like the brand partner's perspective, the process is that we first meet each other. We talk about, okay, where do you stand in your own plastic journey, right? And in the end, it doesn't really matter where you stand, but we ask these questions because it's important to communicate about these things authentically and openly and not to greenwash. And this is why we really want to understand where somebody stands. And if they're at the beginning of the journey, we can still partner up and say this is the first step that we're taking to being more conscious. If there's already a lot of activity that happened in optimizing packaging, this can be highlighted and then say, it's like, we're still not there yet, so we want to also invest in ocean cleanups. If brands want to basically neutralize their plastic footprint, we have to calculate how much plastic is in use. And that's then the second step that we see, okay, how much plastic is actually being used. And then we say, okay, if you want to collect as much as you produce, these are your options project-wise, right? And then we have different projects in different parts of the world, and we always try and find something that is then also fitting into the brand's DNA. So if your customer base is primarily female, we see that, for example, these female-led projects work very well also in communications. If you have a strong connection to Africa, we have projects also in Africa that can be supported, or you can support all the projects globally. So we come up with a volume that we collect on that brand's behalf. And then we sign the contract that usually goes for a year and then renews every year, hopefully. Because the important part about that is also, if you want to do it for 1 year as a marketing campaign, that tends to become greenwashing and is not doing a lot of impact. If you do long-term partnerships and people can build on your support, we can actually hire people on the ground to really make a dent. And yeah, then we start the collection progress, and then we have regular updates with you as a brand to update you on the one side how much plastic we are collecting. We have technology in every project that is documenting every single kilogram of plastic that is being collected, so that the claim itself, if you say we're collecting 100,000 kilograms, can be substantiated, so that you don't run into the danger that somebody says you're saying something that you're not doing. And we keep you updated on the impact that's happening, right? And we also produce content. We go there. This is what I just mentioned. I'm off to India tomorrow. So we're documenting the progress that you can then also share with the community. And I think this is something that is very important, not necessarily from a marketing perspective, but I think what more and more brands realize is every brand these days has a platform. Everybody has a social media channel where you can educate people on the issues that are going on in the world and educate them in an authentic way, and showing that you are also taking action and take them on the journey with you. And I think this is not just great for the environment, because the more people know about the topics, the easier it becomes to avoid certain things. But it is also great to build retention, because me as a consumer, I want to buy from brands that are aligned with my values, right? And where I feel like, okay, this is a role model. They are doing something more than everybody else in the market. So I will continue to vote for that brand with my pound, with my dollar, with my euro that I have in my pocket. And this is then the first year. So it's a lot about educating your followership then as well. And then as we go into the second, third, fourth year, we can also plan special occasions, right? It's like what we just did with you guys. I think maybe we keep that for another day, but there's something coming, which I'm very excited for.
But I won't steal the brand team's thunder on that one, but yeah, it is great, because we have done more and more, haven't we, over the years, you know, special cleanups, education and things like that. So yeah, it has been great from that perspective. I remember when we first started talking, you know, you were only in a couple of countries. I think it was India and Indonesia. You know, you mentioned Africa now, etc. How big, how many projects have you got running now?
Yeah, so we are basically on every continent. We have Asia, we have Africa. We are now also since recently in South America. So everywhere in the global South, we are trying to be active, because the big mission, and we kind of stole it a little bit from Microsoft, who said we want a computer on every desk. We said we want a cleanup in every pollution hotspot. And cleanup is basically a waste management center that accepts all plastic waste under dignified working conditions. This is very important. So the social aspect of it is very important. And these are then usually local partners. It's almost like a franchise system, right? That want to run one of these clean hubs. Currently, there's 10. We are about to open the biggest one yet in India, where we will be managing together with Greenworms in total 6,000 tons a year. And yeah, I think
it's amazing. And I think it's important to, you know, we talk about, you know, ocean bound plastic and the ocean, which is absolutely what is trying to be done so that the plastic doesn't end up there. But you're really doing something that's quite different, because you're collecting it, aren't you, from the households? Yeah. Effectively, you're doing the job of what our dustmen are here, but they don't have the infrastructure over there to do that.
Yeah, and this is why I said we didn't start with a solution, but we wanted to understand the problem first. And the problem is 2 billion people globally don't have access to waste management. They don't know it, that you have a bin in your backyard where you put all the week's trash, and then every Friday somebody comes to pick it up. What they have to do is they either burn it in their backyard, the kids playing around, all the burning plastic, or they dump it into the ocean if they live close by the ocean. And this is why we said, okay, the majority of plastic in the ocean comes from land-based sources. Sometimes it's also like waste management companies picking up the trash, driving their truck to the next river and dumping all that trash into the river, because it's the cheapest way of disposal, right? And this is why we said, okay, this is what we need to change. We need to connect these households. So instead of dumping it into the ocean, where it becomes incredibly expensive to collect it, we say, let's collect it as close to the source as possible. This is where the waste is usually the cleanest. So you have the highest chance to recycle as much as possible that is in there. It's the cheapest way, and it's the most dignified way. And it's the only scalable way, right? If you do a beach cleanup, I guarantee you, you will never ever pick up all the trash that's on the beach. It's impossible because plastic is so lightweight, it's so small, it becomes brittle, it goes down in the sand, it goes into the ocean. A lot of plastic also sinks, and they found
It's too
plastic.
late at that point,
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
isn't it? It has to
Found
be
it in the
done at
marijuana
the,
trash.
yeah, yeah. I think, just to touch on a bit of our journey, Noughty's journey, we've always tried to look at how we can reduce plastic within our packaging, but it's a very complicated, situation, isn't it? Because we know that if plastic is used correctly and is recycled correctly, and we know that the circularity is done, then from a carbon footprint perspective, because it's so lightweight to transport, etc., and so economical, that actually one offsets the, you've got to look at it as a bigger picture. So we have always looked at what we can do. So we used bio-based plastic at one point. We're now moving to a much higher concentration of PCR plastic within our packaging, and ensuring that we've got at least 50% PCR content in all of it. I think the other thing that we're really trying to do is make sure that all of our products are monomaterial. Yeah. Everybody's like, what's monomaterial? So that's ensuring that the packaging is made of the same sort of plastic, so that the end consumer doesn't have to think, oh, I need to take that off and put this one there, etc. So, but I think education is key for us as well, to really speak to our consumers about what can and can't be recycled, the reasons why we use certain materials. And at the end of the day, in the beauty industry, we have to ensure the efficacy of the product is there.
Yeah.
You mentioned, in a lot of these countries, sachets are the key thing that is the biggest problem because of the throwaway. I visited Indonesia. I was lucky enough to go there a couple of years ago, and it is such a big problem over there, and the education is and the infrastructure isn't there to be able to cope with it. But I think we have to start at home, and which is why at Noughty it's really important that we do all these things and look at innovations and what is coming out there. Have you seen anything that you can think of within the beauty industry that has really, you think, changed the way people are using plastic?
I mean, what I personally like is bigger packaging, because I'm a quite loyal customer to my brands, and then I don't want to buy everything every single month. I'd rather spend a bit of money and have a big portion at home, which also means overall less plastic volume. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in the packaging world, for finding biopolymers. There, it needs to go in tandem with the local waste management system. If they can't recycle it, it's good that you're not relying on petroleum, but on a different carbon source. But if it then has to be incinerated, it's also not necessarily bad. But for example, companies like Notpla, actually out of the UK, are working on something that can biodegrade also, where you then always have to see how does that work with my specific packaging. But I think what is always discussed is refill, but there the studies are also showing consumers are so used to the convenience of their packaging, right, that it's very difficult to change that behavior and turn into a refill model. What I found now is a deodorant brand here in Germany that gives you basically a very high-end case where you can exchange the actual stick, which I like. I use them.
And I think that's great in cases like that. And I think absolutely where we can, and in formulations where we can, we absolutely should be doing those things. You mentioned refills. It's a really interesting one, and a debate that we have quite often. I'm part of the Sustainability British Beauty Coalition, and it is all about the 4 R's, isn't it? It's about, reuse, refill, recycle, and making sure that that circularity is happening. It is that consumer mindset that we really need to try and change in terms of that refill. We do the big sizes, which is great for our key products, the 1 litres, and they do really well for our loyal customers. But trying to get that on a retailer's shelf is quite a challenge.
Imagine,
because it takes up a lot of space, and we know space is money within the retail environment. So I think, being part of these conversations within the beauty industry and trying to educate everybody and work together collectively to try and start making these differences is something that is going to be key if we're going to, make a difference further down the road.
Yeah. One concept that I saw, which was discounted in public, but I think makes a lot of sense if you look at it from a packaging perspective. It's one of the more premium soap brands that has the pump, and they are offering refill. It's basically the same packaging, but you don't get the pump again. And this is the one part that can't be recycled, right? It has so many parts in it. So you don't buy the pump again and again, but you actually get the same packaging, same size, but with a twist thing on top. And I think this is something that shows that the company is really thinking about it, but facing the consumer, they will say, is like, what is this? This isn't the same thing. It just doesn't have the pump. And now I have to reuse my pump. And but sometimes I think not necessarily doing what the consumer will then celebrate you for can still go a long way if you then educate on top of that, right? And I think this is, again, something where a partnership like with CleanHub can actually really help, because it's a great hook. It can hook people into what you're doing on your packaging journey. If you say, it's like, hey, we partner with CleanHub, funding waste collection to prevent ocean plastic. And by the way, these are all the things that we as a brand are working on, and maybe also things that we failed at, right? I think it's about progress. And this is what people need to realize. This is what humanity has always been about. We're always progressing. We're always making things better. And sometimes you step left and it's not the right direction. And then you come back.
Absolutely.
And it's still the stuff that people want to hear.
And things are moving at such a pace as well now within the industry, and what, what is being developed, we have to do what we think is right at that time for the brand. As I say, we moved to bioplastic. We're now moving more to PCR, further PCR content. So it's ever evolving, and as the journey of sustainability evolves for everybody, we just have to keep on going. And we're not going to always get it right, but we have to try as hard as we can to at that time do the right thing. I think it's really important that brands aren't afraid to say, we didn't get it right on that occasion, but we are trying to do the right thing, and we are working towards a better longer term solution for all of that. I think this
is what makes you human and authentic.
Yeah, also. Exactly. Yeah. But I think what is key, and people have conversations with me about, where do I start, smaller brands and things like that. I think, the key thing is to really set up clear goals on what you do want to achieve, in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. They might seem big at the time, but unless you set those really ambitious targets sometimes, then you're never gonna really get there. So the small steps to get there then lead to the greater, bigger good, I think.
Absolutely. I had a conversation, I think 2 weeks ago, with a sustainability manager, and she was responsible for, I think, more than 10,000 SKUs, and she wanted to reduce plastic in that. And I said, it's like, don't start with 10,000. It's like, look at what's your top selling product and start there. It's like, there's the saying, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's piece by piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Overburdened.
Take the quick wins first, look at that, and then grow from there. One of the things we've been talking about a lot is, the consumer, and really what the role of the consumer can play in all of this. How do you see that? How do you think that they can get involved in reducing plastic waste through initiatives like CleanHub?
Yeah, I think the first mistake that no brand should make, because that usually always backfires, is blame them. That's the worst thing that can be done. The brands have the bigger platform. They have more resources to do something, right? And then it's really small things about nudging them on how to dispose of the product. Like, what is the right bin for where it's supposed to go? And also keeping them updated through proper labeling of the product on what you're doing. So they have the agency to decide for what is aligning with my values. And I think this then has basically nothing to do with greenwashing. You're just informing them about the initiatives that you're on. And then
I think it's really, I think you made a really good point there. I think it's key. We know that 56% of UK households don't recycle their bathroom waste because it's not in the kitchen, it's not by the recycling bins. So we're actually working with the Sustainability Beauty Coalition to really do a big drive next year on take back those empties, recycle within the bathroom. We can't, absolutely, we as an industry have to do the work. We have to continue to innovate, to evolve, to make sure that we're reducing the plastic, how much plastic we're using, etc. But it is all of also the brand's responsibility to help educate on, because it's complicated, right? Sometimes I look at packaging and I'm like, can it be? Can't it be? And I work quite closely with all of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, the education, I think, is key, don't you?
Yeah, and this is what I meant earlier when I said, right, every brand these days, even if it's just 500 followers on Instagram, you have a platform to educate, and you have the ability to change people's behavior in the right direction. And whenever I'm asked, it's like, what's the best thing that I can do to reduce plastic pollution? It's like, obviously don't buy stuff that you don't need. But so much of the stuff that we buy just has plastic, and then it is important to put it in the right bin. And don't get cynical because the news tell you, oh, the waste managers just export everything to Asia. Yes, that happens, but that is still not a free pass to not follow the rules, because the reason why so much of the stuff actually goes into disposal and goes into other countries where disposal is cheaper is because it's so expensive to separate the waste in the first place. And this is why you have such low recycling rates. If we would follow the rules better, it becomes easier also for the digestive system, so waste management and recycling, to actually use these resources, right?
And I think, we work with First Mile, a company, so we offer, all of our customers, for the hard to recycle, the ones that can't be recycled, a take back scheme. So all they have to do is put it in the free post address, and there are companies out there who will pick apart, all the different elements and actually then recycle it. And I think it's about just really continuing to educate the consumer. Look, there is this opportunity to ensure that everything is recycled. It can't go in the main recycling bin, but there is opportunity to, and most things nowadays can be recycled, but just at the right place.
Yeah, exactly. You need the right technologies, right? And I think there's a big differentiation, and this is becoming a bit nerdy, so I will stop in a second. There's a big difference between technically recyclable and economically recyclable.
Yeah.
And the more you just mentioned, right, you want to increase to 50% PCR. What you're actively doing with that, you're increasing demand for recycled plastics because you're buying more. And the higher that rate goes, the more recycled plastic has to be produced. And unfortunately, it's still the case that virgin plastic is often cheaper than recycled plastic. And this is where sometimes we just have to stand our ground. And if it's a few pennies more that it costs. I know it's always easy. People always say, it's like, well, then just pay the couple more pennies. But if you can afford it, this is the best thing that can be done, because in the end, you're taking market share away from those that are producing virgin plastic, giving it to those that are producing circular plastic. And this is the economic shift that needs to happen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you know, we a couple of pennies on, you know, long term, you know, environmental. So
yeah.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of the prepared discussion. Now we'd love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat, and we will do our best to try and answer them. Has anybody got any questions for Joel or myself? There aren't any currently.
There's a heart. Thank you for that.
Maybe we've answered everybody's questions during that session.
There's somebody's raising their hand. Rachel. Oh no, the hand is gone.
No questions.
I mean, if there's no questions now, you can also just
chat. So I want to hear about your India trip then. If nobody, I've got a question. So what's your plans for your India trip?
We are going to first to Pondicherry. So on the I should not mess up my geography. It's on the east coast of India, and this is where we have a project with a company called ReCity, and are involved actually with a fishing community of 3,000 people who realize that they have so much plastic as bycatch, that they are becoming collection partners there. And we are also launching a bigger program on that side of the coast, and documenting everything. So we're starting to produce more and more long form also. So you can find us also on YouTube and understand more about the on-ground impact. That's actually very important for us, because we've been so heads down in just operating and collecting that we sometimes forgot to take the community with us and really show what's happening. So this is something that we want to do. And then we're going to the West Coast, to Kerala, where over the past 8 months, we've built, together with our partner Greenworms, the first semi-automated material recovery facility. Lots of technical jargon here. Basically a center where all household waste comes in, is sorted, and then goes into the respective channels. And we're also the digitization partner on that. And this will be 6,000 tons, and we have the official inauguration late next week. And then again, lots of video production showing everybody what's going on, because
but that's part of the key thing, isn't it? As you're saying, to communicate what is being done and to educate on the process and the reasons that you're there.
Yeah.
I think we do have a couple of people that want to answer. Now I'm going to try this. Right. Oh, have I done this correctly?
Damani Cosmetics has a question.
I need to try and lock them. Allow mic. Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
Good up. Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm joining you from Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh, nice.
Amazing.
Yes, this is very timely, considering that in our country, rivers have been affected by the waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm currently working on a project in partnership with schools to collect waste, recyclable waste, and whereby they are coming up with creative ideas where they recycle bottles to creative ideas that they can use in schools and at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very timely, and I'm very happy to be part of this meeting.
Sounds like a fantastic initiative.
Great.
You said in in Nairobi, right?
Yes, Nairobi, Kenya.
Perfect. Yeah, working with schools is one of the best things you can do.
Yes. Have you got a question that you'd like to ask, or
do you have any project in Kenya that you're supporting?
Not yet in Kenya, but I can connect you to, for example, a fantastic company in Kenya is Taka.
Yes.
They are great. And then there's Mr. Green, I think also in Kenya, who can probably help you.
Yes.
And else we're always looking for more partnerships. So maybe we can also look at that together. Maybe after the meeting, I can also send you my email address and we can jump on a conversation there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Jess, I think Jess has got a question. I'm just trying to get to Jess. Here we are. Hi, Jess. Have I done that correctly? Jess? Oh, maybe not. Is Jess there still? Oh, no.
Let's maybe put the question in the chat.
Yeah. If you've got questions, can you add them to the chat, please? And then we can try and answer them. Oh, here we are.
Ah, it's turned off. Okay.
Oh, that's why. Sorry, everybody. There it is. So, a couple of questions. So we've got actually quite a few questions. Let me just get to what about the plastic in the refill pouch? Are these not as bad as purchasing another bottle, for instance?
In the refill pouch?
Yeah. So a lot of the refills actually they come in pouches now. I think they used to be, but a lot of these pouches now can be recycled, whereas before that they couldn't because of the technology moving on. They can actually be recycled, but again, you have to look at the back of pack to understand whether it can or not.
Yeah, and it also has to be observed through the life cycle lens, right? So potential material use is less, so you're using overall less resources. And for example, the German company Frosch, as part of Werner and Merz, it's more in the cleaning utensils, but they designed the first stand-up pouch that is 100% recyclable. And I would assume whatever works for the nasty chemicals in cleaning is working for something that you can put on your skin. So that might be one direction to look into.
Yeah. Another one, how transparent are cosmetic companies in their sustainability claims regarding plastic reduction? Are there third-party certifications or standards to ensure credibility? I think that was one of the key things for us when we first started talking, wasn't it? Was we need to be able to prove and show that we are actually collecting the same amount that we're saying that we're collecting. And you've done a lot of work in that, haven't you, in that area to make sure that there is transparency.
Yeah, so we have on our end, we have an engineering team that is doing nothing else than building track and trace software and the verification system behind it to prove every single kilogram of plastic that is being collected. That is ISO verified also by now through a third party called TÜV. This is more known to the Germans, but they have offices in 180 countries. So one of the biggest auditors, technical auditors out there. But that goes far. There's also a movement that's called Plastic Free. They have a label to verify plastic free claims, obviously. There are claims and auditors out there that prove the recycled content for packaging. So I think it needs to be it depends on what you're trying to claim and what you're trying to prove through proper labeling. So if it's a collection claim, I think we're doing a pretty good job there.
I think, going back to all brands, transparent, there was a stage where there wasn't transparency and brands were claiming all sorts of things. But I think the new greenwashing legislation that has come in or is coming in ensures that there, like normal claims, efficacy claims, there's going to have to be that substantiation of anything that you're actually saying within the sustainability arena now, and you have to prove that what you're saying is correct. So I think there will be even more transparency going forward. Last one, when it comes to changing consumer behavior and usage when it comes to refilling, do you think maybe it's better for brands to focus on geographical regions that have low population density, e.g. Scandinavia, that are more inclined to recycling and refilling consumable products, and then let the trend behavior spread to different countries? I think that goes back to, I think that goes back to start where you think you can make the most impact, isn't it? And if you think, and your brand is in an area and a region that can refill and do refills well, I think, France is a great example of that. They've got a regulation in that 20% of the groceries, like so Carrefour, by I think it's 2030, have to have at least 20% of refill products on shelf. So the government is really driving that within France. So yeah, I think, as you said, let's start where you can, and hopefully then it'll have a knock-on effect. Any other questions?
I think one thing that I would like to add also to consumer behavior is to try different messaging, because not every single consumer will care about the environment directly, but maybe there's a different motivation of why they want to do it, right? It's like sometimes it's also okay if it's a cost saving. Like if you do refill and it's just cheaper to refill, that's fantastic. And as long as you know that it's also good for the environment, that's fine. I think that this might be the wrong group to tell this to, because I would assume that your consumers are highly aware of these topics. But as soon as you have a bit more of a mainstream product, the environment might not be the leading factor, but something more, especially in these days, something a bit more egoistic sometimes can still drive the right behavior for the environment in the end. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but
no, I agree. We have to, we as the brands, I think, have to be the lead in these things. The consumer, very much, I think, is becoming more and more wanting to buy into sustainable brands. But, there is a cost of living crisis. There is, everything else that's going on. And as you say, it's not necessarily going to be their main lead in the purchase decision. And therefore, we as the brands have to ensure that we're doing the right thing so that actually, it's already been taken care of for that consumer. All we have to do is then try and get them to be educated on the end of use of the product, rather than anything else to do with the packaging. And then it's, as you say, with your trip to India, with all of our social media platforms, etc., it's just continuing to have this conversation like we are now, and really just drip feeding it in and making everybody aware of the things that we can do, what we can't do, and that's okay, but that we're continuing on this journey, and it's going to be an ever evolving journey that we all are working towards. So I think that rounds it up. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Thank you, Joel. I really appreciate it. And thank you for our long-standing partnership and what we're doing together. And as Joel said, that there are some more things coming up. So watch out for this within our social media platforms. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Great afternoon. Bye-bye. All right. I think a couple of note takers are left.
Yes.
But
thank you, Joel. That was really, really great.
Thank you, Victoria.
Guys, if you
love
want to,
having the discussions with you. I could talk for hours with you on this subject. So I know we didn't get to your presentation, so apologies for that, but
no worries, all good.
All good. Well, thank you. And yeah, I think we will speak again soon.
Exactly. Looking forward to it.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.